And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Stigma can often prevent those struggling with mental illness from seeking help they need. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1990.
But what happens when every day looks gray and gloomy? When depression so blankets our vision that we experience only despair and hopelessness at every turn.
Health professionals are beginning to realize that the lack of information and understanding about the root causes of depression means thousands of people suffer needlessly.
It comes in many forms: mild, severe, short-term, long-lasting. Taken together, the myriad symptoms that we can put under the heading of depression constitute a major health problem for our society.
Presently, the statistics aren't very encouraging. It's estimated that as many as 1 in every 4 women and 1 in 8 men will suffer from depression at some time during their lives.
When you consider the large number of depressed people that go untreated, and the fact that most of these people find themselves unable to cope adequately with the demands of everyday life, you just begin to get some sense of the personal and social problem that we have on our hands.
How to distinguish normal ups and downs from clinical depression can be tricky, even for professionals. And people with chronic health problems and diseases such as cancer and MS are particularly vulnerable.
And the problem is, first, so you go in with your chronic kidney problem and you tell your doctor that you're real tired and that everything is an effort and that you're depressed. And she says to you, well, I would be too with a kidney problem like you've got. And you say, well, thank you very much, and you sort of leave the office. And that is thanks for nothing. And that is a very big problem. It's very hard for the doctor, unless they're very skilled, to say, this sounds like a depression on top of the kidney problem. To go in and ask all these questions here, because a depressed person needs to be questioned intensively. For those of you who are in the business of treating these people, that's something to remember, is that they do not volunteer their symptoms.
Persistent headache is a common clue.
But it's a special kind of a headache in the back of the head and the top of the head. And it's a very vague headache. It's not like a throbbing, pounding thing like you see in migraine. And it's often something that they live with day to day to day to day as part of their depression, and it will lift when the depression is treated. It's not a migraine, it's just another symptom of depression.
Many questions have been raised about the effectiveness of antidepressant drugs, but the experience of the doctors working in the field indicate they can be used successfully, and patients can continue with therapy at the same time. There's one particular group of people for whom there's a special difficulty, however. They are the adult children of alcoholics, and there are many of them.
And these people really have a tremendous tendency to go into depressions at some point in their life. And those people, I find that if you treat them with antidepressants, that a fair amount of their pain seems to get numbed until you get around to taking them off the antidepressants. And then it comes up again. Almost, I've been surprised by that. That's why I comment on it. And then you have to deal with all that stuff from the past. But everybody else seems to benefit from the antidepressant in terms of helping them get control of their emotions. The typical person with depression will tell you that a woman just told me this the other day, that when I was depressed, I was reacting to everything. If anything went wrong, I would blow up or be beside myself or have to break into tears or something like that. Every single thing that happened, the peanut butter lid can't get off. Blow up, the kid's late for school, you know, break into tears at the door. You know, now these things aren't happening, but she's able to focus her energy on the difficult relationship she has with her husband and the feelings around that, and the feelings are coming out. So when you talk about numbing, I think they for the most part, they numb the feelings which don't belong there anyway. And they let the feelings that are appropriate to come through still. And there's no evidence in our literature and the research of that, of the numbing effect. So that was the big problem a few years ago. People were saying, well, if you give antidepressants, you can't do therapy. And that's simply not true. I think people do much better therapy when they're on the medicines, feeling well, doing the therapy, and then you take the medicines away and carry on with the therapy.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. It is currently estimated that 1 in 5 Canadians will experience some type of mental health issue or illness in any given year, with 1.6 million reporting that their mental health needs are not being fully met. Let us return to the archives with Neil Taylor.
Anxiety, depression is pretty common. I would, again, just a guesstimate, say that we're looking at 35–40% of the individuals we see. This is a primary problem, and there could be a number of other related problems and factors.
During the last 10 years, there have been breakthroughs in research into a type of depression that only affects people in the winter months, and specifically those who live in northern latitudes. It's called seasonal affective disorder, or SAD.
Seasonal changes in mood have been identified for a long time. At least a lot of people have talked about it or described it. But it really hasn't been actively researched or investigated or systematically studied until about 10 years ago, when people started looking at winter depressions or recurrent winter depressions as a specific type of disorder, and mainly because of the treatment that was found to be effective in it, treatment with bright light. That's really driven a lot of the interest in seasonal depressions over the past 10 years.
The weather can be a secondary factor, but for true SAD sufferers, there's a treatment that can have dramatic results.
Well, that's been the fascinating thing about these patients, is that they seem to respond quite dramatically to exposure to very bright light. So in a way, it's almost as if they weren't getting enough light. And what we've been doing is treating these patients with a light box. And it's nothing special about this box. Basically, all it is a series of fluorescent lights that emits a very bright light. And they have to sit close enough so that they get a very bright light exposure, much brighter than you can possibly get even in bright room conditions, and close to the intensity of light that you would get in the early morning in the summertime, outdoors.
A special clinic at the University of British Columbia has been doing research into the condition for the last couple of years.
We're looking at finding a number of people who have problems with winter depressions, and we're investigating the use of phototherapy or light therapy in treating those patients with winter depressions. Again, we're looking into some of the biologic causes of this particular disorder and the biologic effects of the light. So we're doing a number of studies to try to find what exactly it is about these people that causes them to become depressed every winter.
What distinguishes seasonal affective disorder from other types of depression?
Well, like what we psychiatrists call clinical depressions, that's really what we're talking about. We're not just talking about people who have the blahs when something bad happens to you. That's a normal kind of depressed mood. We're talking about people who have clinical signs and symptoms of depression. So not only that they're very depressed for a prolonged period of time, but also that they have disturbances in their sleep, in their appetite, in their energy and concentration, and their interest in doing their usually pleasurable activities. So people with these winter depressions actually have more of the what we call atypical symptoms of depression, so that they tend to have trouble sleeping too much during the time that they're depressed. So they may sleep 12, 14, 16 hours a day and still feel they don't have enough sleep. They may eat much more than usual. In most other types of clinical depressions, lack of appetite is a strong symptom. But in people with winter depression, more often they have cravings for sweets and carbohydrates, and they tend to gain a great deal of weight during the time that they're depressed.
And Northwest residents have been among the patients who have responded to light treatment at UBC.
One individual in particular, yeah. And again, I think the treatment in some ways is sort of the test for the problem, because I think what stands out in my mind is the sort of dramatic change that's seen with the advent of
So if the light works, you know that this is the particular type of depression, and it's very clear, there's no doubt.
Yeah, I think it's one of the key sort of indicators is the response to light.
The antidepressant effect of the light is directly through the eyes into the brain, and most patients are in their 30s and 40s and have complained about the problem for at least 10 years.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Many people go through short periods of time when they feel sad or not just like their usual selves. Sometimes these mood changes begin and end with seasons change. Let us return to the archives with Rob Goffinet.
Just recognizing that you may be suffering from depression can be difficult.
Well, believe it or not, it takes a long time. But one day you just come to the realization that the life you're leading has been a little less than 100% for such an extent of time that it surprises you. And it kind of forces you to think about what is a normal, happy life. And you often come to the conclusion that you don't seem to be living the happy life that you thought you were.
And in a high-stress profession like teaching, the condition can make coping very hard.
Well, generally, life became, in stressful moments, just a little too hard to cope with, where you seem to be expending a tremendous amount of your energy that should be, I suppose, enjoyable energy, just on the fact of getting through a day.
And in your job, that must have been extremely stressful, because you have to be in front every day with the kids in your class.
Exactly. There's many aspects to the job that are negative. You're shut indoors for the better part of a day. Very intense, closed atmosphere. And believe it or not, since I've been a little bit more aware of my own problems, I see a lot of depressive symptoms in children in town too. And you often are dealing with problems and stress all day long. And you feel a little bit guilty that your own stress might be getting in the way of your professional job, which is often dealing with the stress of others.
Luckily, Rob Goffinet did use the services of the Skeena Mental Health Centre and responded quickly to medication, making both his family and professional life much easier. But he knows there are a great many people who are going through what he did.
There's a lot of people out there that are feeling this way, and they should not feel, as a teacher you asked me, was there a resistance to come to help or therapy? When it actually came to seeking help, no, there was no resistance at all. I fault myself for being an educated person who, in university, I've taken a psychology course or two, not being aware of how prevalent this is and how the only way that you can really get things better in your life is to seek help quickly, because it is there, and enjoy the results, which come very quickly as you yourself, not the medication or the therapy, but mostly yourself, take charge of your life and notice that you haven't been doing a good job before. And it's almost enjoyable when you take charge and you start making your life a little more livable for yourself and others.
With the level of public awareness about depression on the increase and continued research into the causes of the disorder, we can expect more improvements in treatment. If you want information, contact the Skeena Mental Health Center or your family physician.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Adoption benefits families in countless ways. Adoption gives hopeful parents the opportunity to raise a child they otherwise wouldn't have. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to discover why a terrorist couple chose to adopt.
So sad. The people have a lot of hope.
Alexander Carl has a new home. The 11th-month-old baby boy recently arrived in Terrace, all the way from Romania. Julie and Dwayne Hornlund adopted Alex from an orphanage in Sibiu. Televised reports prompted the Terrace couple to consider the adoption.
We had seen the 2020 shows on TV, and actually we had taped them and watched them probably 4 times running, and every time we saw them, you know, cried and cried and cried. And we were just really touched with what had happened, and we had followed the revolution, you know, from the beginning, and pretty well knew what the situation of the country was, and got involved. Laurie Mitchell had started a relief organization here, and we had gotten involved in it, and very quickly decided that not only did we want to help with the relief end of it, we wanted to adopt a child.
The overthrow of Nicolae Ceausescu's regime occurred late last year. Shortly after that, the Hornlunds began the long and difficult process of trying to adopt a child from the Eastern European country. The bureaucracy was endless.
We had to get a foreign home study, so that involved, I think, 6 trips to Smithers. There was a lady in Smithers. We were very fortunate that is qualified to do them, or it would have meant having to go to Vancouver. So we were very lucky there. Immigration, we had to apply for immigration for them. Police search, you know, criminal record search. There was a fair amount of work from the Canadian end, having to get passports. I mean, neither of us had been out of Canada. Well, we'd been to the States, but neither of us had passports. Had to get Romanian visas, and it was fairly involved.
Once the Hornlunds managed to get over the mountain of paperwork in Canada, it was off to Romania to face more red tape. Anyone interested in adopting a Romanian child must first search for the mother and get her approval. This is otherwise known as mother hunting.
Just because the child had been abandoned didn't mean that they were adoptable. So you had to go find the mother or father and get permission to adopt. And we had some real wild experiences going to villages mother hunting.
Julie and Dwayne got used to the idea of mother hunting and most of the other strange things they encountered while in Romania. But they couldn't get over the horrific conditions the babies were subject to in the orphanages.
We were really horrified by the total lack of emotional care for the children. Physically, I'd say that they were not well looked after, but they were looked after. Their diapers were changed 3 times a day. They didn't have rubber pants or diaper pins, or they had cloth diapers that tied together in the middle, and they were changed at 6 at noon and again at 8 o'clock at night. So if they happened to mess their pants at 7, they stayed in it until noon.
First impressions are usually said to be lasting impressions, but that wasn't the case for Julie, Dwayne, and Alex. But that was all for the best.
It was a very intimidating experience because the mother, who had never seen him from the time she'd given birth, is standing beside me. And Dwayne and I were standing there, and the lady that we were staying with, and a nurse carried him out to the orphanage door. And the poor little baby, I mean, it's 36 degrees outside, and his first time he'd ever seen sunlight, and he's blinking and crying, And he was dirty, he was quite dirty. And I didn't know whether I should take him. The mother was upset, you know, her first sight of her boy. It was awful.
The Hornlands returned to the orphanage where they had saw little Alex for a second time. This time they were sure they wanted to adopt him.
He was really shy. He wouldn't look you in the eye, or you know, you'd look at him and he'd look away right away, and couldn't lift his head, couldn't lift his arms, couldn't lift his legs, just laid there. I quickly realized that a lot of the children stimulate themselves and have the type of personality that will, you know, start moving their legs and playing with them in their arms. But he was really shy and had been quite sick, so was quite withdrawn, and probably would have turned within a month. He probably would have been totally into himself. I think we caught him just in the nick of time.
I don't ever want to travel again.
And what a few months can do. Julie and Dwayne can't believe how much Alex has changed in the short time he's been in Terrace.
He's just come leaps and bounds. I mean, he's crawling all over the house now and walks around the furniture, and you know, he's just changed dramatically. I think the biggest thing I've noticed, though, he was so shy and so withdrawn, he would not look anybody in the eye.
Dwayne returned to Canada shortly before Julie and Alex, but he says changes in Alex were evident to him the day the baby first arrived in Terrace.
First thing I noticed about Alex is when he was in the orphanage, he was starting to move a little bit. But they got off the plane and he was squirming around. And first time he opened his mouth, he has 4 teeth in there. And in the orphanage, he had no teeth.
While the Hornlands are adapting to Alex and his changes, it looks like Alex is getting used to his new life as well.
He needs a lot of love. He's very cuddly. I think he's trying to make up for lost time. He's very, very inquisitive. I think he's jam-packed 9 months of living into the last 3 weeks. And he's so curious about everything.
Alex not only has a new home with a new set of parents, he also has a new brother named Shane and a new sister named Kathy.
Oh, they love it. Absolutely love it. It's really opened up their life. They have to get up earlier in the morning because now it's not just a matter of being totally selfish, getting themselves ready and going to school. It's, you know, spending half an hour playing with him and talking to him and fighting over him. And but they've reacted very well. This was just a couple of the children in the orphanage.
Alex is less than a year old, yet he's already established a past far more unusual than that of most people. And at some point in time, he'll probably want to know about his history. His mom and dad are prepared for that. They plan to tell Alex everything he wants to know.
We took a lot of pictures. One of the fellows we were with videotaped the orphanage and the history of Cebu, the wall around Cebu and stuff. We have cut out numerous newspaper clippings of different orphanages and the conditions over there and what had happened, why there were 62,000 children in orphanages, and we'll definitely explain it to them. And we'll take him there if he'd like to see, you know, probably when he's 15 or 16 and a rotten teenager, he'll have questions.
Alex will be a year old next month. November 13th will be an extra special day for all the Hornlands.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.